So how many pumpkins is too many pumpkins? That's actually a trick question. There's no such thing. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we're making a pumpkin farm. I'm so excited to get started on this project. It's something that I've had in my mind for about a month now, and my kid is so obsessed with pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns. So once I saw a picture on YouTube, it was like one of those ambient AI videos that's got like some background noise on it. I'm gonna go ahead and put a clip on the screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. But as soon as I saw it, as soon as Jared put it on the TV, I said, I want our new house to look like that. And here we are today, making that come true. Before I get started, I do want to say that I have gathered these pumpkins over the course of 2 years, and I will probably be adding on to it in the future. So if this looks like an intimidating amount of pumpkins to you, do not fret. This is something that I have started to accumulate over the years, and I think that I'm going to keep running with this theme for quite a while, especially if it turns out as cute as I think it's going to. So let's go ahead and get into the video. The pumpkins that I'm primarily going to be working with are these 9-inch pumpkins from Michaels. I do also have the 6-inch. I believe a 4-inch is the small little bitty baby pumpkins, but I'm primarily going to be carving the 9-inch pumpkins. Now, last year I did carve some of these as well, and I made a little short on it, and somebody called them ugly. So this year I'm going to try to upgrade my art, not freehand, use a pencil before I carve, and see if maybe that will make them less ugly. I thought they were cute last year, by the way. And last year I also realized that these are a little difficult to cut into, and they can be a little tricky. Always keep a sharp blade. And also, if you do try this at home, please be careful. I did poke myself last year, and I'm going to try not to poke myself this year, so we'll see how it goes. To start off, I'm going to work on the scarecrow because I think that that's going to be the most difficult part of our whole pumpkin scape here. So I have the pumpkin that I'm going to use as the head of the scarecrow, and then we'll dive into how I build it. Before you get started on your jack-o'-lantern faces, you want to locate the very visible seams on the pumpkins and make sure that those are on the sides of your face, not in the front where it would disrupt any of your carving. These foam pumpkins can be a little tricky to cut, but the seams are extremely hard, so you definitely don't want that to be into an area that you cut into. I had both a box cutter and an X-Acto knife to work with here, but I only ended up using the X-Acto knife for all pumpkins. The important thing is just a really sharp blade. I find that the best way to carve these is to fully push the knife into the pumpkins and then try to drag it while you cut as much as you can. Once you have that started, pulling the X-Acto knife or box cutter in and out of the pumpkin, following your lines, really does help to make sure that you get all the way through the pumpkin. After your cuts are made, push the piece that you just cut out and it will either fall into the pumpkin or you'll need to adjust the cut accordingly. This year I did 3 new pumpkin faces. I had one for my scarecrow, one that had a jagged mouth, and then one that I was going for like a vampire type face. It was something that I ended up like adjusting the smile as I went, and I was like, oh, I kind of like the vampire look of this. Unfortunately, most of the pumpkins that I carved last year just didn't make it, but the little one that I carved last year did, so that one will have a face as well. Once my pumpkins were carved, I moved on to creating some crates, and I cut down the stick for my scarecrow. I picked up these pieces of wood from my local hardware store, and I went to the discount bin, so everything was 50% off, and I ended up spending like $13 for all of this, whereas one crate is $11 from Michaels, so I was like, I can just make that. So that's what we're gonna do. I ended up making 2 crates, but I decided that I hated the look of having 2 crates, so I ended up only using one of them. To make the crates, I cut down this board to about 2 inches wide to match the width of the other board that I had purchased. Once cut down, I moved on to cutting 8 pieces at 9 inches long and 12 pieces at 20 inches long. I ran out of wood from my discount lumber, so I used some spare 2x4s to create some of my 20-inch boards. For the sides of the crates that were used for support pieces, I eyeballed these to see how much space I wanted the crates to have. So they're about 5.5 inches each. Again, I ran out of wood, so I ended up using some old pieces of scrap walnut that I had laying around for my second crate. The crate that I did off camera, I had used wood glue to hold the supports on the 2x4s, and the one that I did on camera, I just used nails. I highly recommend using wood glue because that crate held up and the one that I did on camera actually ended up falling apart after I decided that I didn't want both of the crates, so I removed it, and as I was removing it, it fell apart in my hands. I don't know why I drove the struggle bus and chose this route instead of just grabbing one of the clamps that I had, but I highly recommend doing that. Eventually, I do wise up and grab a clamp. I am using 1-inch nails here, and for the bottoms where the supports are with the 2x4s, I went in with, I believe, a 2-inch nail directly into the bottom. I do recommend that if you do create these, to use wood glue for the supports on the 2x4s. I wasn't going for perfect here, but what I recorded was a bit more jagged than the other one. You'll see in the final footage that the other crate that I used was a bit more polished. I wish I would have recorded that one, but I used it as a test run. I think I just flopped on this second one. My measurements were all wrong and nothing was really going right with this, but I would recommend using wood glue for the supports, and then I would recommend using longer nails if you're going to nail into it like I did here. Also use a clamp because that just makes your life so much easier. It's like having another hand, and I don't know why I didn't do that from the beginning. A proper work table would also be super helpful here. I am still unpacking everything, as you can see from the state of the garage currently, so I don't exactly have the best work surfaces at the moment, hence why I am building this thing on an ice chest. For the scarecrow, I decided to cut down this 8-foot board into a 4-foot board. I believe that it's just a 2x2 furrowing strip. I do wish that I would have gone with a 5-foot or a 6-foot cut at the end of this, just because he was a smidge short, but I did love how it turned out at the end. Anyway, I do just wish that it would have been a little bit taller. I cut a hole in the bottom of the scarecrow pumpkin and I drew a line where it naturally fell so that way I could start assembling the body. I have so many trash bags and I just put a bunch in there and tied it off here. So this is going to be like his shoulder area. I'm just going to tape it below my line here. Huge shout out to my mom for sending me this shirt and the fabric that I used for this scarecrow. Thanks, Mom. I'm not really sure how I want to stuff the arm. Like, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know. Maybe we can go from this side. Let's see if we can maybe, like here. Yeah. Okay. Go from the inside, kind of fluff it up like that. Okay. Now, look at that. Let's go. The shirt looked way too big on the scarecrow, so I trimmed the sleeves and then I measured where the grass should fall before deciding to cut just below the second to last button on the shirt. My child has pre-fluffed these for us. I started with hot glue and then I decided to use a mix of hot glue and tape for securing the straw grass material. I'll try to link what I can below, but I picked up pretty much everything at Michael's. For the first 2 straw pieces at the bottom, I glued them at an angle so that they would fall into the front, and then I built up the bottom part from there. With both the hot glue and the tape, these have held pretty well so far, so I'm excited to see long term how they stay together. I definitely think the hot glue and the tape were the right move. So like, I don't know if I want to do the back too, because we're not going to really see it. I do think I want to go maybe out a little more and down, so that it can go more in the front. Yeah. Okay, yeah, like that. Perfect. I have one more that I can use. I think that was pretty good, actually. For each of the arms, I taped 2 of the grass stalks together and then I secured them to the upper underarm area of each scarecrow. Because I cut the shirt, I knew that I wanted to roll the sleeves, so I did 2 rolls on each sleeve for a more polished look. I wasn't super concerned about the bottom of the shirt because I knew that I was going to be making a sort of vest for the scarecrow, so that's why I left it jagged as is. Even though I cut the shirt, it was still pretty baggy, so I took just a regular hair clip and I clipped it to the back of the shirt. I wish that I had some sort of pins at the time so that I could pin it together, but the hair clip worked pretty well for me. I kind of just mumbled to myself the whole time that I was working on the vest, so I'm sorry if you see me talking and the words don't match my voiceover. I cut a small V in the fabric at the top where the collar of the shirt is, and then I draped the fabric over the scarecrow body. You can absolutely sew this if you want something more crisp, but if you don't have sewing tools, I wanted to make this as easy as possible to follow along. I decided to cut both of the sides of fabric where the arm line of the jean shirt fell. This just seemed the most natural to me, and then I cut downwards where I could fold the fabric over and pull it back slightly. Then I moved on to cutting the bottom of the fabric long enough to fully cover the bottom of the shirt that I had cut and still have some excess to fold over. Repeated the same steps to the other arm and moved on to gluing everything down. As you could see, my cuts weren't exactly clean, so I folded everything over to give it a nice crisp look. I added a small touch of glue to both of the shoulders and both of the sides to secure the vest in place. For the bottom, I simply just folded it under a little bit and I used tape to keep my makeshift hem in place, ensuring that I couldn't see any of the shirt underneath it. I really just went for whatever I liked visually as far as how the actual vest fell, so do whatever makes you happy. Given the placement of our scarecrow, I did not care about the back at all. However, if you want to do the back, I'm sure you could follow the same exact process for the back of the vest. Also, just purchasing a secondhand vest or using a vest that you have from home would absolutely be okay too. I slipped some remote operated fairy lights and battery packs through the mouth opening, and then I hot glued the head of the scarecrow in place. How I will retrieve the battery pack to remove the batteries at the end of the season is currently none of my business, and that's a job for future me. That said, the other pumpkins didn't have enough of an opening at the mouth, so I did cut a small rectangle in the back and slid the fairy lights and battery pack in that way. I was a little concerned that the light would come out of the back and look kind of funky, but it actually worked super well. And now on to the second project. All right, let's discuss my templates. Typically, whenever I make a template, I print it out using PDF and Adobe, and then I'll print it as a poster to where basically it would look like multiple images stacked together, and I'll tape it all so that way it's the size that I need it to be. However, my printer was being a little finicky, so I just traced the image off of my computer screen and I cut the image out onto some cardstock so that way it was a little thicker. As you can see on this one right here, one of my little lines for the pumpkin broke off, and then even on this one here you can see that my lines didn't quite survive from being cut with the X-Acto knife. However, it worked for what I needed it to work for, and that is how I got the templates that I have for our window here. I used some tape to tape up the cardstock templates to the window and use paint pens to create these pumpkins. Now, every movement of the paint pen does show up very brushstroke-esque, so I wanted to make sure to give these pumpkins some movement, and so I painted at a curve for each section of the pumpkin. I did decide that my templates were, in fact, a little too small after doing my first set of 3 pumpkins, so I decided to freehand on the other side, and I think my little freehand pumpkin came out pretty cute given the fact that I had already traced so many pumpkins. One thing that I didn't know that I would like so much is the gap between the orange and the pumpkins. I did purchase a brown paint marker, but once I did the brown in the middle, I just hated the way that it looked. It didn't look like what I wanted it to look like, so I decided to keep the gaps in the pumpkins the way that they were. Unfortunately, this is the footage that I got for my freehanded pumpkin, so wait until the reveal to see how that turned out. I do think that if I had the ability to print, my pumpkin templates would have been larger and I wouldn't have had to freehand a larger one, but overall I love how these windows turned out. I had considered drawing some books on the top to try to make it look like a little bookshop, or maybe add some sort of like whimsical fluff at the top, but let me know what you think in the comments if I should add to the top or keep it as is. I will say that I've grown rather fond of window painting, so I'm really excited to do more throughout the holiday season. For project 3, this is actually something that I did on my channel a few years ago, but I wanted to improve upon that project. This year I'm painting a pumpkin rug, of course, where last time I painted some ghost on the rug. When I used just acrylic paint, I found that these rugs seriously absorb all of the paint, and it takes a lot of paint. So I decided to use gesso, which is a canvas primer, and this worked beautifully. I used the same stencil method that I used for the windows and just added the gesso in this template. Once everything was dry, I went in with an orange and green acrylic paint to finish off these pumpkins. It was a little difficult to completely cover the white spots. However, when you're looking at it from afar or just quickly glancing at it, which is usually how these rugs typically get used, it's great. I used a couple of different brush sizes for the actual acrylic paint. I used this 2-inch brush for the gesso, and then a small brush for the green, a 2-inch brush for the orange, and then a smaller brush to kind of go over any of the missed white spots that I had in the orange. I love how vibrant these colors are on the rug, and I'm very confident in saying that if I hadn't used the gesso, it would not be quite so vibrant. I didn't put any top coat or sealer on this rug because it's really not getting exposed to the elements by our front door. Everything is fairly well covered in the area that I'm placing it in. And even with the crates and the scarecrow, I didn't do any sort of top coat. If you do decide to do a top coat on any of these projects, there are various spray lacquers from your local hardware store. So I ended up making 2 crates, but I think I'm actually just going to use one of them because having one on each side looks a little weird. My child has claimed this pumpkin as his own, so I don't know exactly how long it's going to last out here, but it's going out here for now. This. Is that cute? I do have one more that I started carving that I could put in here. What if this was the situation? Oh, that's cute.